I feel very buoyant and light and resilient. I feel as though this chair is not as solid as it seems to be. I have a feeling that my hands are not resting against this chair, and I see flashes of color quite a bit. Somehow or other, I think that I'd like to rescue myself from the idea that there's so many different realities here. Somehow I feel an observer.
Why do you do that now?
Well, the square is the ordinary rectangle, you see. It's one of the perfect means. So I think that's what I would like to do. I'd like to find out what reality I'm in.
The notion that a world of consciousness and a world of matter are absolutely separate and are those that do not intersect is considered to be true in the views of most scientists to this day. But at the same time, a lot of people both in science and outside of it intuitively feel that there is something extremely artificial in such separation. That unity was something that the famous theoretical physicist Wolfgang Pauli tried to find. And what he was looking for was not just anti-people from the hidden sheet of reality. He was looking for an answer to where in this new emerging picture of the forked universe was a place for human consciousness. Being well aware of the unorthodoxy of his ideas, Pauli did not disclose them in scientific publications, but he regularly discussed the future merge of matter and consciousness into a coherent picture in private conversations. Quote, "In my personal opinion, in the future science, reality will be neither psyche nor physical, but somehow both of them at once, and neither one or the other separately at the same time." And if you inquire about his biography, including a very unusual collaboration with the father of analytical psychology, Carl Jung, it will be easy to find more than just interesting things. For example, things like Pauli's essay he sent to Jung once. In this essay, a rather unusual attempt is made to find a way to describe nature in a way that would uniformly unite physics and consciousness on certain archetypal foundations. He believed that archetypes are present not only in dreams and the active imagination of people, but can be expressed in modern scientific terms and concepts. For example, according to Bohm's concept, the world of reality that we live in is structured in a way that every existing thing is hidden in each of its component parts. The starting point for the scientist's reasoning was the famous Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paradox, which clearly manifests the concept of the inseparable unity of the quantum world. Now, just to remember, the essence of the EPR paradox is that quantum entangled particles behave strictly in a mutually consistent manner. That is, any change in the state of one particle leads to an instantaneous change in the other, no matter how far it is from its twin. Bohm was reflecting on this mystery, which contradicts not only common sense, but also Einstein's theory of relativity, which imposes strict restrictions on the speed of propagation of interactions. He came to the conclusion that elementary particles interact at any distance, not because they exchange mysterious signals among themselves, but because their separation is an illusion. In other words, entangled particles are not separate objects at all, but in fact extensions of something more integral and fundamental at some deeper level of reality. Jung's mystical ideas about the collective unconscious as an invisible world common to all people that is inhabited by souls and structured by archetypes cannot be proved with scientific rigor yet. According to Jung, the inner world of an individual is not controlled by sexual impulses and the desire for pleasure only, but has the same degree of freedom as the external reality. Dreams and hallucinations, fanatical beliefs and manic ideas, all kinds of phobias and the like are all examples of autonomous processes in human consciousness that manifest various aspects of psyche energy. And it was these ideas that provided the basis for Pauli for an analysis of his own dreams that had very specific physical concepts in them, albeit expressed in an extremely strange context. Specifically, Pauli's dreams related to physics are of particular interest, and some are known to us from published Jung books and their private correspondence. The first thing that immediately caught Pauli's attention when he was trying to analyze them was the obvious discrepancy between the images and the dream's content to the established Jungian theories about the work of the unconscious. According to Jung's ideas, dreams represent the pure nature of the collective soul, which works as a self-regulating system and compensates for the limits of human consciousness by transmitting initially known information to it with the help of established archetypal images of the mythological type. But in Pauli's dreams related to physics, something significantly different was happening. Usually, everything looked as if really knowledgeable people were trying to convey clues to the problems on which he was working. At the same time, modern scientific and mathematical apparatus was unknown to them. For instance, in one of such dreams, a man who looks like Einstein drew several vertical straight lines on the blackboard, which he then crossed at right angle with another horizontal line. Pauli understood that the teacher was trying to convey to him the idea of the one-dimensionality of quantum physics, behind which there is a deeper multidimensional reality. Trying to interpret this dream in the style of Jungian psychoanalysis, Pauli gives this interpretation of it. Quote, "This showed me that quantum mechanics and the so-called official physics as a whole are a one-dimensional slice of a two-dimensional, more meaningful world, the second dimension of which can only be the unconscious and archetypes." Jung himself always proposed archetypes as structuring principles for the unconscious only, but Pauli began to lean towards the idea that they are also the basic principles for structures and processes in the physical world. As another very important milestone pointing in the same direction, Pauli considered the ancient works of alchemists who tried to comprehend the mysteries of the world through the unity of spirit and matter. Here, Pauli was in complete agreement with Carl Jung, who made a long-standing discovery that attention to the mysterious texts of the alchemists of China and Europe opens up a picture of their experiments not only with different chemicals in the laboratory, but also with different components in the complex structure of their own consciousness.
The notion for the alchemists that Jung brought forth very strongly was the idea of projection of psychic contents, projection of the active imagination onto processes and objects in the exterior world. In the case of the alchemists, it was the swirling chemical processes in their alembics, in their alchemical vessels, that they projected the great round of the archetypes on to these chemical processes. They saw crystallization, sublimation, separation as statements about the contents of the psyche as much as statements about the exterior world, because for them, the firm division between mind and matter, the firm ontological division between mind and matter that is built into Western thinking now, did not exist. Well, now we as moderns ordinarily only experience this state when we are intoxicated by hallucinogenic drugs, or when we are in a state of severe psychic weakness, when there is then overwhelmment from the unconscious that is not with the permission of the ego, as happens in the psychedelic experience. So for the alchemists, mind and matter were two terms whose mutual exclusivity could be blurred under certain circumstances, and the terms of one could migrate toward the other.
In modern psychology, these ideas began to be approached again by noting the similarity of the properties of consciousness with the concepts of quantum mechanics. In the article in Frontiers in Psychology, the group of authors noted the following, quote, "This review examines phenomena that apparently contradict the notion that consciousness is exclusively dependent on brain activity, including phenomena where consciousness appears to extend beyond the physical brain and body in both space and time. The mechanisms underlying these non-local properties are vaguely suggestive of quantum entanglement in physics, but how such effects might manifest remains highly speculative. The existence of these non-local effects appears to support the proposal that post-materialistic models of consciousness may be required to break the conceptual impasse presented by the hard problem of consciousness. In this regard, quantum entanglement, non-locality, and the secrets of the structure of our forked universe, as well as the place of consciousness in it, can be combined directly through the concept of a quantum computer.
I do not know what part of what reality, again, this feeling comes over me of almost like the singing, but I think it's the soundtrack or the film going through the machine.
Moreover, what if human consciousness itself is the result of a kind of quantum computer hidden in the brain? Some scientists further suggest that consciousness generally goes beyond the familiar layer of material reality, such as Roger Penrose, the Nobel laureate in physics. In his works, he talks a lot about quantum consciousness. According to Penrose, the entire human consciousness is impossible to calculate. It is fundamentally uncountable. And in physics, objects whose behavior is impossible to calculate exactly are the entities that obey quantum mechanics. He also believes that because of quantum mechanisms, there is a separate psyche reality embedded in the physical reality. If true, a big problem arises right here. In this article, the author emphasizes that, in fact, Penrose's model removes the physical ban on various kinds of occult and psychic practices. Quote, "In fact, if consciousness is not the result of psychological processes in brain, but a separate reality with its own space-time, then according to the methods of theoretical physics, the only thing needed is to create an operator that will ensure mutual transformations of mental and physical spacetimes. And with the help of such an operator, psyche reality will directly affect physical reality." Someone will say that such an operator has been working for 1,000,000 years. These are the skillful hands of representatives of the Homo sapiens, who embody all sorts of invented things. However, this is not about this, not about the use of intermediaries in the form of a human body. Now here, it would be interesting to see if it is possible to do some experiments to prove such a theory. The author of the article gives a detailed overview of several physical models and studies that develop this idea from the side of physics. A very interesting study published by Christian Kerskens and David Perez. They did not put forward hypotheses about the essence of the quantum machine of consciousness. Instead, they used the postulate that if there are two known quantum systems, then some unknown quantum system interacting with them can ensure the creation of an entangled state. In their opinion, the known systems are water molecules, precisely the proton spins of bulk water, and the unknown system is some kind of process in the brain. The researchers report that they have selected such operating conditions of the NMR installation that have suppressed all signals associated with classical correlations of hydrogen spins, and therefore the signal is possible only from quantum effects. And they managed to detect such a signal. Quote, "Our findings suggest that we may have witnessed entanglement mediated by consciousness-related brain functions. Those brain functions must then operate non-classically, which would mean that consciousness is non-classical." Moreover, during their research, it comes as a surprise that in a dream state, a person's consciousness works not less but more intensively. Now, a few more different quotes will be of interest to us. But a programmer who controls quantum consciousness remains completely out of sight. In computer theory, a programmer writes a program, sets the quantum states of qubits, and forms their superposition. Further, changing the states of the qubits, performs some logical and computational operations, and eventually finds out which superposition came out. In the brain, as follows from the models, a programmer is not visible and everything happens quite randomly. Of course, if we take Penrose's point of view, if we assume that the quantum process in the brain is controlled by the structure of spacetime itself, or even by the force behind this structure, we can form some idea of a programmer. Staying within the framework of materialism, though, it would be great to find other explanations and mechanisms. And there are hopes for this, since the idea of quantum consciousness has been formulated. And not only formulated, the first models have already been created. Some experimental material has been collected, which may indicate that such an idea is not unreasonable. Therefore, by virtue of the axiom of the unstoppability of the process of cognition, someday we will still learn about the details of the mechanism and about a programmer who controls consciousness through a quantum system. End of quote. A very interesting angle is provided by information theory and a parallel school of thought called bioinformation. Information theory was first articulated by Claude Shannon. He realized that intelligent machines could be built out of simple logic junctions with binary yes-no answers. Crucially, his view was what laid a base for development of modern computers. But more importantly for us is that he put information theory into practice by building intelligent machines that helped us to reassess what counts as intelligence. We began to see our own intelligence in a new light, less as a series of chemical reactions as was previously thought by biologists, and more as the processing and communication of information. Eventually, it was discovered that the current flows across membranes were what mattered, and that energy usage had structure and direction. In other words, it transmitted triggering information. It was David Bohm who moved the concept of information forward into a whole new dimension and brought us closer to understanding the role of quantum properties of plasmas involved in processes of consciousness. Bohm noted some of the bizarre behavior described in quantum mechanics in the common human experience of consciousness. This is important because human brains, like quantum computers, contain complex plasma, and plasma may be a medium by which uncertain and bizarre quantum phenomena enter the human experience. It was later in time when researchers like Viktor Inyushin revealed that he discovered the complex cold plasma in the body that he called bioplasma, and that it appears to be concentrated in the brain and the spinal cord. It is also interesting that while solving challenges of quantum computation and retaining a system memory, researchers come up with a cold plasma as a solution as well. In this article, the results of an experiment are described in which they create an ultra-cold plasma. Such plasma has a very important property. It self-assembles and forms robust structures. Moreover, the plasma quenches to achieve this state naturally, without needing a web of laser fields, and is stable. Just as importantly, the system doesn't have to start at a temperature near absolute zero. The mechanism of self-assembly operates naturally at high temperature, seemingly leading to a spontaneous state of preserving memory of the system. This discovery can give us a hint on unique properties of a cold bioplasma that works in the hot environment of our body too. It was theorized by Bohm that there must be some underlying field or dimension that was interacting with particles in plasma, resulting in life and a form of intelligence. This vision of intelligence in plasma became a paradigm for David Bohm as he developed a scientific and philosophical account of the universe as hologram. Could such an underlying interacting dimension be the hidden world of the unconscious and archetypes in our forked universe? Now, returning to the question on how such non-local properties like the ability of consciousness to extend beyond the physical brain and body in both space and time might manifest, one can ask, can things like remote viewing, out-of-body movements, or even life after death be one of the many manifestations of non-local properties of consciousness? The answer is hazed by the major problem of mainstream science. And it is not only because it stubbornly continues to assert that human consciousness is exclusively a product of the brain and disappearing with the death of the body. A much more serious problem is that apart from the mainstream, we also have a secret science, where scientists have been actively exploring non-local and officially non-existent properties of consciousness for a long time. Exploring them secretly and without sharing such developments openly with society and the world for matters of national security. However, some declassified documents allow us to peek behind a curtain of secrecy of three-letter agencies on what is happening in the so-called secret science.